I should have never taken that librarian job in a small town. I missed the bright colors and lively noises from the city, and I soon came to understand why the job offered so many benefits. Still, I was young, broke, and had no family or friends that I particularly wanted to be geographically close to. It was a fresh start, in a sense. I drove for 10 hours before I stopped before a baby blue 2-story building, shyly decorated with white plaster here and there. The library wasn't sizable, but nothing else was, and back then books were already going out of style to average people. Despite it being mid-afternoon, no one was sent to open the door to me and show me around. Getting off my cheap Versa crowded with all my earthly belongings, I inspected the building's front, looking under the tattered rug and inside a pot with dying flowers. There it was. As I unlocked the door, dust and clamminess hit my nose. I was unfazed, being used to being around old books, but it felt weird that the library had simply been closed for how long it took me to accept the job. Probably weeks. A brief letter in rushed yet meticulous handwriting sat by the front desk. To Miss Heather Andrews. I hope your trip was safe. The working hours at the library are from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Don't expect a lot of public. Focus on keeping the books aired and organized. Your apartment is upstairs, and I included a copy of the basement key, but you don't need to worry about going there. It's quite messy. The city is currently under a temporary curfew, and everyone is required to be inside by 9 p.m. If you're ever out of town, please return only when it's light outside. If strictly necessary, you can schedule an appointment with me at the City Hall, and I can explain more about your functions. Our address is attached below. Regards, First Secretary Bonnie G. Clinton. The coldness of her words made me realize how utterly alone in the world I was. I spent the next hour moving my stuff upstairs. The apartment wasn't half bad, although small, but I had nothing to complain about. Despite the salary being modest, I could live in the apartment above the library for free as long as I was employed. A few people passed by me on the street and stopped to stare, but no one offered help. I was fine with being forever a friendless outsider, but my back really hurt after all the effort. I found the apartment decently clean, and after I was done with my moving, I decided to just order some food and rest before my first day of work. The previous librarian had left 3 restaurant pamphlets near the landline phone. I would soon find out that these were all the options I had in the whole town. Luckily, I've always been good at cooking. Around 7 p.m., I decided to order Chinese, and the delivery boy was the nicest person to me in weeks to come. He was Asian American and around 16. It was probably a family business. "Hey, new lady! I'm Lee, the fastest delivery boy in town," he greeted me. "So, the library will be open again?" "Yes. I'm Heather, by the way. Do you like reading?" "Not really, but I hide here and pretend to study so my dad won't overwork me." I laughed at his honesty. "As long as you're really quiet, I'll be your accomplice." He laughed back for a while, then went serious. "Oh, right. Someone told you about the curfew?" I nodded. "Good. It gets really noisy from 10 to 11. I always blast my headphones. I think I'll be deaf by 20. Anyway, wait, what do you mean by it gets really noisy?" "You'll see. Just don't come out, okay? It's safer if you don't." But the other librarian was really nervous about them. "Oh, right. You can keep the change," I replied, feeling a little overwhelmed. Curfew, daily noises, cold neighbors. Of course getting a place to live rent-free was too good to be true. "Thanks," He smiled gratefully. You're generous. I hope you'll stick around for longer than her. I was creeped out by his words, but at the same time, he could be just messing with me. Just a little prank. I could forgive that because Lee was really likable. My body was all tense as 9 p.m. approached. I double-checked if the door and windows were locked, then tried to distract myself with a random TV show until something felt odd. Precisely at 10 p.m., I heard a loud, long howl. Then another and another until it was a symphony of dogs. I laughed in relief. So that's it? The city is under curfew because some mutts are terrorizing it by annoying people every night? I carefully watched outside across the curtain. Everything was dark, but what little light came from the other windows illuminated the street enough to allow me to see maybe 3 dozens of pairs of eyes. And they belonged to very large forms. So they're huge dogs, I muttered to myself. I can imagine that causing chaos on such a small place. All in all, I got used to my new life quickly. The curfew was still enforced, but it didn't bother me that much. Some nights the howling was accompanied by the sound of heavy steps, but in the distance. Like something large was moving around in the not-so-distant grove of pines that surrounded the town. It's amazing how you can get used to oddity if, other than that, you get to live a peaceful life. I was pretty much being paid to read books all day. Of course, I had to list and organize them, and I took upon myself keeping the library as dust-free as possible, but it was a great job. Most days, no one even came by. Lee would come once or twice a week and quietly take a nap in a desk. You can come by every day if you want. It's always empty anyway, I offered. But he explained that it would be too unbelievable if he claimed to be studying every day. The library was quite unappealing to the population. Kids sometimes dropped by asking if I had this or that comic book, but of course, our non-existent budget for new books couldn't keep up with Marvel and Company. Older people seldom showed up to borrow gardening books, and they were always cold or even rude to me. I kept telling myself that I had a good job and a good life. Way better than struggling to pay rent in a flat with 3 bossy roommates at least. Lee's eventual presence was somewhat comforting, but I only started to cheer up when I met Marceline. She was probably 10 years older than me and had a natural and strong beauty, like a prima donna from the woods. I never took those things seriously before, but she also had an amazing aura. Ha! I wish I knew the library was back open sooner. I could have saved so many herbs, she sighed, still smiling. I'm Marceline. Hello, madam. I'm Heather. I mean, Miss Andrews. I stumbled. It's nice to meet you. How can I help you today? Heather it is. It's great to meet another outsider. So you're not from here? Quite the opposite. I'm your local witch. She laughed pleasantly, but I sensed a hint of bitterness in it. I then realized Lee was sneaking out of the library when he noticed her, clearly scared. Of course. This was a complete middle-of-nowheresville cliché, I thought. Can you grab me this book? Marceline handed me a scrap of paper with a title I didn't know. It's in the forbidden section of the basement. That was the first time I went to the basement. I wasn't particularly curious about it earlier because I was still exploring the main floor, full of shelves containing amazing stories and knowledges. Despite the spider webs and really old-looking books, It didn't have an oppressive aura. All the volumes in there were in pretty bad shape and clearly needed to be restored, even if Mrs. Clinton told me not to bother with it. I would call it the forgotten section instead, I stated as I climbed up the stairs. Those need a lot of work. I'd like to restore them. I like you, she replied, and we talked for hours. After that day, we became really good friends, and Marceline came to the library more often than Lee. She was amazed by every single story I had to tell about my life in the big city, college, and even my unremarkable childhood. My new friend was a good listener. She always brought me something delicious to eat and some exotic tasting tea in a thermos. Marceline was a great baker, and her presence made me happy. Do you really grow everything in your house? I asked, impressed. Well, not wheat and stuff like that, of course, but all the tea herbs, strawberries, wild berries, those things. Can I see it sometime? She laughed in joy and amusement. You want to visit my place? Didn't I tell you that I'm the local witch? What? But you're a good witch. A bad witch wouldn't bring me all those treats. I laughed too. Maybe I'm just trying to get you plump so I can eat you just like in Hansel and Gretel, she joked. It felt a little bit ominous for a split second, or at least I imagined it did. Anyway, of course you can come. What about this Saturday? Marceline gave me detailed instructions about her address. It was a short trip by car, then a bit of walking. Marceline's house was in the outskirts of the town and quite quaint, with a great view to the southern mountains. The rustic and spacious bungalow made of raw wood was pretty much as I had imagined her place to be. All around, plants grew freely. For some reason, I imagined she would have a lot of cats and maybe a few hens, but there were no animals around. I kind of expected you to have cats, I remarked as we peacefully had tea on her porch, watching the clouds move lazily across the sky. We had already talked and laughed for hours and hours. Or chickens. It would fit my persona, she agreed. But I have no pets inside and I'm a vegetarian. I looked around. Her place was considerably far from the downtown area where the library was, and she apparently had no car. Do you go to the library by foot? Yeah. My legs are really good despite my looks, she replied, somewhat distractedly. Marceline always dressed in hippie-ish skirts or dresses, more like a druid than a witch if you ask me. Her place was really close to the pine grove, so I couldn't help but feel curious about the nightly sounds. You know, besides the big dogs, sometimes I hear something big moving kinda far. Do you hear it too? I think it's probably in the grove. She smiled. Okay, I have to tell you a secret. Oh, right. I promise to keep it. No one likes me anyway, I replied. Lee had stopped visiting the library due to Marceline's constant presence and was polite but distant whenever I ordered from his father's restaurant. I suspected that it had more to do with the adults around him than with his own will, but it still hurt a little. Marceline whistled. I waited silently in anticipation. At first, I didn't notice them, so I let out a scream when I noticed we were surrounded by wolves. But I soon understood they weren't menacing. In fact, they were like big and fluffy good dogs. They were majestic, with white and light gray fur and eyes that almost felt kind. I counted around 40 of them. Marceline looked at the sky. The sun was now gently warm and starting to disappear behind the western horizon. I'm taking the boys for some exercise before their shift starts. She got up from her chair. Want to come with us? Sure, but please tell me what's going on, I replied. I was fascinated and confused. Something bad lurks here at night, so despite people not liking me, I send my wolves to the town to protect it. They keep the thing away. That's amazing, Marceline. Seriously, I'm just baffled, but in a good way. I think you're great, I clarified. But I'm curious, how did you, learn to control them? Oh, no, I don't control them, she replied modestly. They can just understand me, so I ask them to protect us. I feed them and care for them, so they do it. I don't know how we get to communicate, but my mom had it too. I think it's just a family thing. Then we ran together through the small meadow that was her backyard. I was quickly out of breath, but they would slow down from time to make sure I was still following. I even got to pet some of the wolves. That's how I'll always remember Marceline. Auburn hair kissed by the sun, freely sprinting with her unusual pets, her laughter filling the air. It was already dusk when we finished exercising. I barely felt tired or noticed the time go by. Not to be a bad host, but I think you should probably go now. The road is no good at night. I'll send one of the boys to escort you to your car. She hugged me goodbye. Thanks for being you. I would never share this with anyone else. I walked the way back to where I had parked, since the diminutive clay road that led to Marceline's place couldn't fit a car. 2 wolves followed me like bodyguards, making me feel safer. Still, I felt observed by something else. My blood ran cold when the biggest wolf started barking insistently to a tree, so I quickly entered my car and drove back, only remembering to breathe again when the 2 wolves I left behind were just dots of snow in my rearview mirror. It was the next Monday that everything started going to hell. I had decided to go to the 3rd restaurant of the town that day, the only one I still didn't know. They served traditional American cuisine, which to me translated to hot dogs and canned food. But I hadn't prepared anything for lunch and didn't feel like eating Chinese or Mexican, the only 2 other options. I'm telling ya, the witch is the one sending them wolves to scare us, a red-faced fat man yelled. Johnny saw the outsider being friendly with a wolf. So that's what was observing me. Mean people. Worse than a grove monster, if you ask me. The guys at his table nodded. A younger man with a forgettable face asked, Then wouldn't the outsider be the controller? Don't be stupid, Bob. Didn't the wolves start coming before? Besides, why would a girl from the city control animals instead of the witch? Then they noticed my presence and started whispering nervously. I didn't have lunch that day. Instead, I walked back to the library feeling ashamed, even though they were the ones who should be sorry for talking like that. I had a bad feeling about this. What would these country bumpkins do if everyone found out that Marceline was the one sending the wolves? She didn't show up at the library that day. I wanted to contact her, but she didn't have a phone, and driving to her house was too dangerous after the library closing hours. Like the huge nerd I am, it never occurred to me that I could close the library early, since no one was going there anyway. Especially when they knew that I was friends with Marceline. I hate that I automatically always put my sense of duty above everything. I trusted the townspeople knew better. I trusted that Marceline was wise enough to handle everything on her own. I was a coward. That night, right before curfew time, I did something I haven't done in a long time, since my family banned me from their house and church because I foolishly admitted to be dating a girl. I prayed. I didn't want 10 p.m. to arrive, and still it couldn't come fast enough. Everything was dead silent since the curfew time. Then the first howl broke the night, followed by the distinctive sound of a gunshot. Then another and another until the streets were filled with violence. People yelled things like, "We're tired of the curfew," "Take down all the beasts," and "We won't be controlled by the witch," as they shot stealthily from their windows, not giving the wolves the opportunity to escape. It didn't last long. The tame wolves were like big, silly dogs meant to guard, not to attack and kill. They were all taken down in less than 10 minutes. Out in the street, people yelled and celebrated. Even the mayor and the police force had been part of this sneaky murder of animals. I wept. They were happy to kill Marceline's beloved wolves. That made me sick. But I didn't dare go outside. I felt like something bad would happen to me if I did too, because I too was an eyesore that didn't belong in their savage little town. Then a thunderous roar broke the night. It was so loud that it made my window frames tremble. The heavy steps were suddenly irresistibly close, and the air was heavy with fury. Scared that the building wouldn't hold, I quietly ran downstairs and decided to hide in the ancient basement. I felt safer, but also anguished because there were no windows and the ceiling was thick, so I couldn't see and barely heard what was going on outside. The muffled noises of torture lasted all throughout the night. People screamed, things were broken, and now the timid sounds of shots didn't seem to work. The whole town was rendered powerless. I was afraid I would be found, afraid to die for other people's sins. But I survived through the night, and as the first rays of sunlight broke, I finally dared to go upstairs and peek through the blinds. As soon as I saw the aftermath of the carnage, I screamed and ran outside. Every single building was in shambles, its remaining walls painted crimson. Loose limbs, loose heads, and loose eyes were scattered among the rubble of the houses. It was like a bunch of flesh-eating demons had a particularly hardcore party and didn't bother cleaning up after themselves. Some of the human pieces were so fresh that they still twitched, despite being irrevocably lifeless and destroyed beyond repair. And in the middle of all of it, hair soaked in blood, clothes tattered and on her knees, stood Marceline. She was badly injured. "Marceline!" I cried. "Here, come inside, let me clean your wounds." "Just grab your keys and leave," she replied, weakly. No, I'm not leaving you," I replied, now letting the tears flow freely from my face. My voice echoed. We were literally in a ghost town. "You have to go before the police from the next town arrive," she insisted with all her might. "I don't deserve your kindness, Heather. You're my friend, and you lost your pets. Of course you deserve everything I can do to help you," I shrieked painfully. She smiled, sadly. "You still don't get it, do you?" I'm cursed. The monster you heard in the woods, the wolves I sent to protect the town. It was true that they were protecting everyone. She sighed. From me. She then collapsed on the floor. I sighed and drove away without ever looking back. Watching the news, I later learned that the destruction of Middle of Nowheresville was imputed to a mass bear attack, even though no one could find a single bear in the area. No one wanted to acknowledge that something huge, supernatural, and incomprehensible could have done it. I never should have taken that librarian job in a small town. I should have stayed miserable in Manhattan instead of falling in love, becoming the sole survivor of a, quote, bear attack that tore apart 272 people, carrying Marceline on my shoulders to my car, tending to her until she recovered, finding us a new pack of wolves, and spending the rest of my life being charmed by my, sometimes monstrous and man-eating, but still good witch. But I'm glad I did. A huge, huge thank you to all of my poltergeists. Alex Schaefer, Bobby Tripp, Calderin, Daniel O'Connell, Erica Warren, Forever, Shadow Blackhawk, JTX31, Mark Zapan, Brian Horn, Spirit Father, Stephen Swiftbird, Twisted Skipster, Alternative Night, and Michael Fawkes. Your donations and continued support are so appreciated. So, as always, thank you. From the very bottom of my heart. I exhale, trying to open my eyelids. They flicker violently, unable to stay in one place. I'm on a road somewhere. I don't know where, and I don't know why or how. Rather than my energy slowly returning to me as I hoped it would, instead it feels as if I'm burning out. One singular memory suddenly clears in my mind. It is my 65th anniversary today. I have no idea what the occasion may be.